Hey, we're back.
Wow. The gang is finally back together.
Yeah, man. Where have you been, bro?
Since March 3rd, I've been in Tampere total of like 2 days.
Jesus.
Pretty much straight from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Then a couple of days off, and then I went to Yonsu. You know, we have a Aloha Ramen in Yonsu.
Oh, nice.
So I came up there and just tidy up and take care of some things up there.
Good.
Give some people a break, and then just got back. So
Nice one.
So
Good to have
cheers,
you back,
guys.
man. Yeah.
Cheers. Here's to Michael, our guest here.
Yeah.
We'll talk about him later a little bit.
Cheers to Tam coming back from Yoensu.
Cheers to the gang being back together.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been a few episodes where we're not the three of us.
Speaking of which, if you guys can see, we're at the beautiful expansion of the bunker. Yeah, this is a couple years in the making. We've been trying to find this place for a while, but like a lot more games here, billiards.
I have been.
PS5.
You can tell us more about it. You probably know better, but the few times I've been here, it seems like a bit more alive. Like,
yeah.
You know, I know you were busy already, but now I can see that every time I come here, there's way more people.
Yeah.
So I think it has been great.
Yeah.
Really good.
Perfect little haven for nerds, really.
Yeah.
I mean, all the games, good food, a couple of drinks. If you play darts, if you play pool, I really like it. I think it's good.
So what is the concept? It's my first time in bunker, so I don't really know.
Oh, okay. So so one thing, me and my business partners, when we first started this, and they're like, basically, what are you missing from America? I'm like, you know what? I miss going to video game arcade. I'm 50-year-old, kind of a boomer, so I miss that nostalgic kind of old school arcade kind of feel, where you can have drinks and food. They don't have that here. But now there is. So it started off as a smaller one on that side. Okay. And eventually, we're like, well, why not bring bigger games? Like dancing games, car racing games, pool table, a proper gaming environment where, you can come with your family also, or you can come have a drink and just come on a date. We see lots of dates here. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
awesome.
It's been a good concept. So.
I'm not a boomer, but I also grew up with arcade games and stuff like that. We used to put a 20-cent coin into them. I remember quite vividly when I was still growing up, and we used to play Spartan X, and we used to play all these other, what is it, Pac-Man and all that kind of stuff. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
So
me and my friend, we used to skip school to play Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. So this is bowling alley in our town that had like this one Street Fighter game. So we're high school students, And we're also very mischievous. So we took fishing line and we super glued it to a quarter.
Oh, yeah.
And so we put it through the slot just enough to get the trigger it on. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, I actually once dodged church and went to the arcade with my big brother. And we spent all our money, including the bus money. I had to walk home. Yeah. And we were in the city. But I'm talking at least a good 15 kilometers at least walk from there. But it was worth it,
Yeah.
Like the video
in
game.
Mexico, it's a big thing that your mom will tell you, like, go get 5 pesos of tortillas or something. you get to the store, can you give me 4.50? Yeah. You have like a 50 to put there, like play one game.
Nice.
Yeah, the most satisfying feeling when you're playing arcade games is when you actually clock the game, is what we call it back home.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what you
clock
to
it.
it.
Yeah.
You clock the game, you basically play it until you beat the boss at the end.
Yeah.
That's the most satisfying feeling.
Yeah. But, it might be my nostalgia coming back. Like, I come back and I play, like, Q*bert, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong. That motherfucker's hard, man. It's like, there's a word Nintendo hard. It's the truth, because there's no save points, right? When you lose, you go back to the beginning. So like, as you say, you got to just keep putting quarters in there to continue the game.
I like, my brother's crazy good at video games. And we'll play Call of Duty, for example.
Yeah.
He's like 25, 50 kills without deaths. I nuke all the time. He's crazy good. And then we would switch with my cousin. And now let's play these things. He couldn't handle it. Even though he's crazy good, these games they used to be really hard.
Yeah. I remember old school arcade games when I was like between 12 and 16. You used to be able to smoke inside. I remember all the video game consoles got burn marks because while you're smoking, you put it down to play.
The yellow Nintendo.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But we have a special guest today joining us. Right?
Yes.
The enigma. I've known this guy for some years now, but not much is spoken of him, just good things. But it's always one of these like, have you seen or what's going on? Then, man, introduce yourself and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Michael Gabagas, from South Africa originally. Been living in Finland now for 11 years. And basically, I am a wine professional. So I've been in the wine industry now for a good minute. Like, it's been a while. I started off in South Africa in humble beginnings, basically, in a township called KwaMashu. I don't know if you know, but in South Africa, when we had the apartheid regime, people were taken out of the original places where they lived in. When I say people, I mean people of color. If you were deemed to live in a place that was considered to be too good for your skin color, you were then moved into an area and crammed like sardines into an area where that was eventually called townships. And then the areas that where people were moved from would then be occupied by the white South Africans. And that was basically apartheid. And there were many nuances to it. There was a Group Areas Act, for example, that dictated that people have to live in separate areas. There was a Morality Act that dictated that you couldn't date outside of your race. And there were different other acts along the way. So I grew up in that sort of environment, and I got to see a little bit of apartheid towards the end of it. I remember vividly when we voted in 1994 on the 27th of April. Those were the first democratic elections that we had in South Africa. And I remember those quite vividly because just before those, we had huge conflicts between political parties that wanted to be relevant once we become a democracy. So once we switch over from apartheid regime to democracy. And they were killing each other on the streets, and I saw quite a lot of that growing up in the township, and that somehow shaped me in a way, because I really appreciate being in Finland because of that upbringing. Because in South Africa, when you walk around the streets, unfortunately, you always have to look over your shoulder. Even in affluent areas, it happens that people have now become so brazen, because in South Africa there's a huge gap. Basically, the biggest gap between the rich and the poor in the world is in South Africa. We have a huge amount of rich people, and I was fortunate enough because in my line of work, I've been working in fine dining establishments as a sommelier, for example, and I would bump into the richest people that you can find in the country. And I've served, for example, politicians to Hollywood stars and huge performers, especially from the United States and so on. And then I would go back home and I would see the different reality. So I would go from one extreme to the other extreme.
Which city is KwaMashu close to? Is it
KwaMashu is in Durban.
Durban, okay.
Yeah. KwaMashu is in
Isn't
Durban.
That where
East
Robbie's
Coast.
from?
I think so.
I think Robbie.
Yeah, Robbie might be. Yeah.
But it's in the East Coast in Durban.
Okay.
So that was my upbringing. Like looking over my shoulder, I once got robbed of less than €1. Back in the day, it was something. You could buy a loaf of bread with it. But I got robbed of a few cents right in front of my home. Just as I was getting from the shop on my way home with a loaf of bread, and I had the change with me in my hand, and this group of guys just came, stopped me, cocked a gun, and they said, "We want whatever you have in your hand, and however much it is." And I gave it to them, and I was reluctant to give it to them because as a male, growing up in such a
indoor,
growing up in such an aggressive society, you want to stand your ground. And I try to stand my ground until the guy cocked the gun. He had already pulled it out, but when he cocked the gun, it sent a message.
Yeah, like, here you go.
And I was like, dude, just take it.
Yeah.
Because it was we had these weird things, man, that were going on where people would. It was fashionable at some point for these. We call them gunmen or gunmen in our dialect. But we call them gunmen, and they had this habit of shooting you on the ankle so that you can't chase them after they rob you.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be a cripple for the rest of my life. So
Kind of smart though.
I just gave it to them.
Maybe cops should start doing that.
So it was a rough neighborhood that I grew up in, and an unequal society that I experienced. But I have to say that when I left school, at the age of I did my matriculation in when I was 17. So at the age of 18, when I became a young adult, I also got the opportunity to move from the East Coast in Durban and go to the West Coast in Cape Town. And the reason for that move was complicated because I had a stepfather, and my mom just thought that I would be safer if I moved away because he was quite violent and things were getting quite crazy. And my mom said, this is getting out of hand. You got to move away for your own safety because your stepfather is getting even more and more brazen about the way that he sort of abused me, basically. So that opened up an opportunity, and it's a lesson at the same time because out of that adversity, a huge opportunity opened up for me. Because when I got to Cape Town, I went to my uncle who was living on a wine estate, and he was living on a wine estate that made wine and cheese at the same time. They had a cheese factory and a winery. And when I arrived there, my uncle basically spoke to his boss, and it was within the next day that I got a job there.
Nice.
Wow.
And I was one of the cheesemakers, and they basically taught me from scratch, like, this is how you put rennet in and starters in, and this is how you make cheese, and this is how you process it. And I learned the ropes, and then I started making cheese with my uncle and his colleagues.
What kind of cheeses were you guys making?
I was in the department of making camembert and brie.
Nice.
And another cheese called Royden, which is a combination of these soft cheeses.
And Cape Town is known, right, to have really good vineyards, to have really good, and producing some of the best wines. But as you mentioned earlier, it also has some of the biggest income gaps in the world as well. Hey? Cape Town properties are expensive and all of that. So, like, what was your experience like moving from Kamashu and then into Cape Town and then starting to get into the space of,
Bro,
like...
I'd never seen white people this close. Like, I'd never experienced the Caucasian community in their numbers, right?
And now you're in Finland.
So, in Kwamashu, it was basically a society, I don't know if you know, but in South Africa, we have the biggest population of Indian people outside of India.
Oh, yes.
Really?
So if Trevor Noah once made a joke, the comedian, he said that if you bomb India today, like if you nuke India, the new India would become South Africa.
Okay.
And specifically, it's in the East Coast in Durban, where I come from.
Okay.
That's the biggest concentration of Indians outside of India. And I grew up around Indians, and I went to Indian schools because that was the most affordable way to go to an English-speaking school, was to bridge the gap between, the extreme of going to a so-called black school and a white school was going to an Indian school was the most affordable thing. So that's what my mother could afford as a factory worker.
And even the cuisine, right, is also highly influenced. Your bani chows, your
we have bani
curries.
chow, curry, biryani, and all those kind of things. That also shaped me a lot. But why I bring that up is because the closest thing I got to a white person were Indian people, and then
Cape Town,
and then I went to Cape Town, and then I was like, wow, what a big change. And I lived on a wine estate, literally, and worked, made cheese. And then the same wine estate and cheese factory, they opened a restaurant. And and this restaurant had a bakery in it, and I was told that I'm going to become the front of house guy. Like I'm going to sort of welcome the guests, be at the cashier, and I could move away from the cheese factory and start working in the restaurant. And when the restaurant opened, I did indeed shift from the cheese factory to the restaurant. But then when I got there, we had a Swiss guy. His name was Andy, crazy guy. But he sat me down and he said, "Look, we're short of a confectioner.
Come to the bakery.
We know that we wanted you in front of house, but now you got to be in the kitchen.
You're gonna make candy.
How are you? How comfortable are you to be in the kitchen?" I was like, "I'll take it." I was like, "I'm willing to learn skills," and I was only 19. So I was willing to learn new skills, and I was teachable, and was willing to learn.
How many languages do you speak?
6 fluently.
6,
well, out of the 11 that we have in South Africa, I speak a few, and then Finnish would be my 6th. And I'm comfortable now to list it as my 6th language because I realize that I'm conversational now. In Finnish.
So how did you transition from there to Finland?
At Fairview, the winery is called Fairview. I was there, made some breads and cheesecakes and whatnot, and then I transitioned into the wine industry, and that's probably an important transition to mention because while I was working as a confectioner, the owner of the winery approached me and said, "Look, I make more money selling wine. Aren't you interested in applying your talent, your skills in learning about wine and then working for us on the wine side of things?" And I was happy to do that. And one of the reasons I was happy to do it was because I had been working in the cheese factory, and one of the cheeses that they were making was for Christmas in December, and that cheese literally had wine poured into it. It was infused with wine, with sweet red wine. And my first experience with wine was when I was in the cheese factory, tasting a little bit of the wine before I put it into the cheese. And then I realized, wow, okay, wine can taste really good. It doesn't only burn and whatnot. So by the time I was offered this opportunity to transition into wine, I accepted it with open arms, and then I went into my first academy, the Cape Wine Academy, in Stellenbosch in Cape Town, and I studied a short course in wine, in the introduction of wine, South African wine to be specific. And then the rest is history. Like I literally got into wine from that point on. I learned about the nuances of wine, the descriptions, the fact that I could use my nose in so many different ways to be able to distinguish wine from one to the other. That really opened up my horizons about this, kind of product. Fast forward of how I got from there to Finland is that I worked in Fairview at the winery for another year or so, and I did a harvest there. I transitioned from working in the wine tasting room, or at least working as a confectioner, to the wine tasting room, and then from wine tasting room to the cellar.
Yeah, hold up. Did you guys mash it with your feet? Because I did that in San Francisco at a winery. It's a good experience.
In commercial wineries, it doesn't really work that way because the scale of grapes is so large. But when some commercial wineries, what they do is that they would allow tourists to come in, or enthusiasts to come in and mash the grapes with their feet, and then bottle it as just a
special batch.
A special batch just for them to have fun. But we did it on a commercial large scale. So I did a harvest, and I started seeing how wine is also not just served, not the end product of wine, but I saw the process of making wine and the production process, and that got me really interested in the industry. Then I ended up enrolling at an agricultural institute called Elsenburg. So Elsenburg is an agricultural institute that trains farmers or agricultural youngsters or youngsters that want to be in the agricultural sector. And I chose the winemaking profession, of course.
Okay.
And I studied winemaking for the next 3 years of my life. And then I decided to also work while I was studying. So I worked in a different winery this time, as a wine ambassador. So I was basically in the tasting room, and this winery also had a museum. Soms Delta was the name. And I used to give museum tours while giving people wine tastings and stuff like that. And I did that for several years during my studies, up until the point where I was going out one night and I was in Cape Town on Long Street.
Yeah. You met your souvenir.
Yeah. Langstraat.
Yeah, Long Street was synonymous with a whole lot of good things back in the day.
It was like internationals and like expats.
It was
Long Street is kind of like what maybe to America it's kind of like if you go to San Francisco and there's the road where people are chucking the beads and stuff.
Yeah, or like New Orleans. Right?
New Orleans. New Orleans.
Okay.
Long Street is like a party street. It's like restaurants, clubs, it's live, it's just
and
really
it's side to side of the street.
Yeah,
it's not just one side of it.
Of course.
The whole street is just packed, or at least it used to be. It's changed a lot, by the way.
Yeah.
People don't go there anymore, or at least the expats and the students. So it used to be a place that was very popular with exchange students, particularly. And that's exactly what happened to me when I was out there partying one day. And the funny thing is that I wasn't feeling good about myself on that day. I was just thinking about life and trying to transition from what I was doing to doing something a little bit more meaningful to me. And I was just going through...
You're lost.
I was going through a whole lot, and I was trying to think to myself, like, what am I doing next? So I just decided, okay, well, you know what? Let me just go have one drink. And I went into a place on Long Street called Dubliners. And it's no longer called Dubliners now, but they've changed the name. But at the time, it was Dubliners. And I went in there, and people were dancing, having a good time. And for some reason, this one chick caught my eye, right? And I also noticed that it wasn't just her, but there were other people that were with her, because they were huddled in. They were sort of in a group, and I could tell. And there were these tall Dutch and guys and Germans that were with them, and I had to think of a strategy of how to approach her without offending the people that she was with. You know how people can be cockblockers, right? So I basically decided, let me work with reverse psychology here, and I went to the guys instead of going to her.
Yeah, of course.
And I said to the guys, hey, how you guys doing? Can you tell me, is that girl available? And I had one girl in mind, like from all the girls that were there. No, they were all pretty, but I had one that really just, connected with me. And the simple answer from the guys was, no, she's available. She's not taken by anyone. And she had only been in the country for 2 weeks. So that was my cue. And I decided, okay, thank you for the information. It was the last song of the evening. Adele was on the speakers, and
did you ever speak to those guys again after that?
I got to know them after that.
Okay.
But basically, I went to her and we danced to the last song of Adele, and she gave me the right number, which was a big thing. But I waited 3 months for my first date with her. I kept on calling her. I kept on trying to connect. And I just remember the feeling that I had when I saw her, when I noticed her, and when I identified her, and I said, that's the girl that I want to talk to. And it took 3 months of her blowing me off and having excuses and of not meeting. And then one day she just decided, okay, fine, I'll meet you. And at that time I was working for a city winery, this mobile winery, where this one crazy French guy, Jean-Vincent Redon, used to take grapes from the foot of Table Mountain. There's some grapes he used to grow there, or still grows there. And he used to bring them into his cellar in the city center and make them there. And I was working with him briefly for a while. And I decided to bring her there because that's the only way I could flex at the time.
Come check this one out.
And we had a great time. And I just remember that, when we were sitting with each other, the sun was shining in her face and she was just radiating. And I just thought, this is gonna be my lady, and
when you know, right?
Yeah.
Times me.
Okay, so fast forward.
That's how I got to Finland.
So just fast forward. So you came to Finland, and then I knew you one time. I think we were at was it the potluck the first time I met you, or before that?
No, the first time we met was at the rugby World Cup.
Rugby World Cup
in Red Lion, 2023 October.
Yes, wow, this memory.
He's got a
So we met there, and I remember like you were asking around for job opportunities because I was and I was like, what do you do? Sommelier, and I was like, the fuck, like like no offense, but you're just not the typical person that I look at and say this is a wine person.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So I was, and then after that, I think we talked a little bit, and then eventually you worked at. So what restaurant did you work at, and where are you working at now?
Yeah, so just to tie those in, like my experience in wine is linked to producing wine. That's what I know or knew the best. But I didn't like making wine, I have to be honest. You work in a wet, dark, underground cellar.
Controlled environment.
If you have a personality that is more interpersonal, that is more sort of, social.
Yeah, you're by yourself.
It just doesn't match.
Balance.
There was an imbalance there. So I transitioned from making wine into serving wine because it suited my personality much better. And I did that, I would say, well, in the early stages already, and of my experience and in the industry of the wine sector. I basically, when I got to Finland, I had already served in some high-end establishments in South Africa, for some 5-star establishments. And some of the notable people, I don't know if I should mention him, but R. Kelly was one of the people.
You met R. Kelly.
And Charlize Theron. And some of the local sort of stars. It was really high-end. And,
but when I met you, I don't know if it was just before or just after COVID, you were actually importing wines as well to Finland, right? So you had a wine import business, and you were also like artist management.
So when I got to Finland in 2014, I was hosting these wine tasting sessions in Jyväskylä, which is where I was staying at the time for about a year and a half or so. So I basically was able to get together a few people that were interested in wine, and they were each paying some 50 euros or whatever. And I got together some wines, and I knew how to present them, and I actually gamified the whole thing. And basically I covered the bottles, and we had a blind tasting. So they had to guess which country the wines are from and whatnot, and we had fun doing that. And that blossomed into something meaningful when I got to Helsinki. I moved from Jyväskylä. I got an offer in Helsinki to be a sommelier. That was my first sommelier gig in Finland. And it was at an establishment called Grotesque with a K. And when I got there, I realized this is one of the top places in Helsinki. I didn't know at the time. But when I got there, I was like, whoa, I landed a really good gig here.
Grotesque is nice.
But like from what I hear from your story is you're into the wine, you're a sommelier, but I'm guessing you have been through the whole industry, right? You've been from it inside out. From what I hear.
Growing the grapes all the way to...
I'm guessing, without knowing anything from the industry, but just listening to you, I'm guessing you have a bit of an advantage to just a normal sommelier that just tasted wine and knows a bit. It sounds to me like you really know.
I'll tell you in a minute what the disadvantage is. But yes, in some ways I have an advantage. But basically I got to Grotesque, became a sommelier there, got to know some amazing people, got to interact with really high class people there, and served some amazing wines that I had never come across before. You must remember that I was more accustomed to South African wines, and now for the first time the wines of the world are open to me.
Yeah.
And as you know, when you walk into Alko, and for me the best Alko is the one in Arcadia in Helsinki with the 2 floors. That basically just is a candy store for an adult. And when you get there, the whole world is open to you as long as your bank account can handle it. Alko can cater for you. Yeah. But then from there I decided, you know what, I cannot do these hours anymore, the sommelier hours, because I was coming home at 3 or 4 in the morning. Yeah. And then I decided that I want to further my education. And all I had was wine education. And then I decided I'm going to enroll for international business degree. I wrote the entrance exams, I applied, and I got it, and I got in. And then I studied for the next 4 years. I left work and I studied for the next 4 years. And while I was studying, I was doing these private wine tastings. I became a member of the wine cellars, of Nomad Wine Cellars in Helsinki. It's a private wine club. And they have an establishment where you can basically, an actual venue where you can offer wine tastings. And they had glasses, they had a dishwasher, they had tables, they had everything that I needed to be able to host wine tastings. So from time to time, to stay relevant in the industry while I was studying so that I don't have big gaps, I decided to host these tastings. And that kept me going for a while.
And those were private. I have to say that I appreciate the fact that when you started hosting those events, you also reached out to kind of like a closed little avenue of also like people of color that were interested in wine.
Yeah.
Right? Because usually the reason why I'm bringing that up is that that's not often what that is, or how people see that. So the fact that you opened that space up to people of color in Finland, and specifically in Helsinki to start off with, and it trickled down obviously to Tampere.
And now we get to the disadvantage that I wanted to refer to when you said that I'm sort of exposed to the entire supply chain, the cycle of the wine industry. One of the most successful events that I did there was the one where I made no money. Because what I'd done is that I was craving to grow this wine society and craving to grow my wine circle. So what I decided to do, instead of charging people to sit down and enjoy some of the wines that I had to offer and me telling the stories behind those wines, I decided that I'm going to have an event where everybody brings a bottle of wine and we all share it. We all share the wines that we bring.
Brilliant.
And the kind of people that were there, it was amazing. I had wines for the first time from Israel, from Lebanon, from Slovakia, Slovenia, because those are the people that showed up. They were coming from all parts of the world, and many of them were people of color as well. And that really was an eye-opener for me, and that was something meaningful. It's one of the most meaningful things I've ever done while I was in Helsinki. And the greatest challenge or disadvantage that I came across was that I wanted now to transition into the corporate side of wine. I was no longer a cheesemaker, a confectioner, working and pouring wines at a wine tasting emporium in a winery, or a sommelier. I was now a business student. And I was set on becoming someone corporate, but sticking to the industry at the same time. So the next natural step, was to become an importer. And then the moment came when I graduated, and just before my graduation, I had gotten an opportunity with a very big importer here in Finland to do. It was a bit of a tricky deal that they wanted me to do. They wanted me to steal clients from other importers into their portfolio.
Of course,
So I was an economic hitman. And
poaching, poaching,
and when things started to go good, and your family at home heard that, hey, this man is a businessman. What happened?
So I was fortunate enough that it worked out for me. I literally took one big client from an importer here in Tampere, and I got them to transfer them to their wines and their entire portfolio to this importing company in Helsinki, and I was proud of myself.
Wow!
And I thought, this is it. I'm gonna make it. I'm in this now. And the tricky part is that they didn't want to pay. Even though I had the skills, even though I had the salesmanship to be able to pull it off, they didn't want to pay. What they did do, though, is that because at the same time what I was doing is that I started hosting big events in Helsinki, basically parties. It was the middle of COVID, and you weren't allowed to gather indoors. But the loophole was that there was no rule or guideline about outdoor gatherings. So because then it was outdoors, you could breathe, there was fresh air. And so they didn't have rules for that specifically. They were very loose rules. So I exploited that loophole, and I decided I'm going to start, because people were so miserable at that time. So I started hosting events. So how it ties in with this importing company is that they decided to pay me in alcohol. They were supplying me with wines and beers and other beverages for me to supply to my guests at the parties that I hosted. So I was the only guy ever to host parties where alcohol was free. Because I got the wine for free, and I got the beers and all the alcoholic beverages. I got them for free, and I didn't sell them. I also gave them away for free at my parties. And people started hearing about these parties, and I held 12 of them in total. In the summer of 2021. And so it was every single weekend for 3 months straight. So basically for the whole summer. And it was just a situation where I didn't feel valued enough for them to say, hey, let's give you a percent, not a percentage, but let's give you a fair remuneration for you transferring this deal over to us. And basically that could have worked out in a way whereby I would get a few cents or maybe even €1 per bottle that was sold for that duration of time that the wines were in the new importing company, or something, or they could
give a percentage of the contract,
or just a flat fee,
or just a flat fee, or consultancy fee,
but something that kind of like goes along the lines of your knowledge, right?
But what I'm trying to say is that I was exploited. I was exploited, and it wasn't the first and the last time that I was exploited, because you have to remember that I was desperate to make a name for myself in the industry in this country. In South Africa, I'd already made a name for myself, and I had gotten to the point where I was even interviewed in the biggest radio station in South Africa with 6 million listeners, and I was able to interact with people on a very sort of top-notch scale, and I was in a new country now. I had to start from scratch to make a name for myself. And the opportunity came when the embassy of South Africa decided to come on board. And they decided, hey, let's work together. Let's create a wine fair where we only feature South African wines, and you can be the ambassador of South African wines. And this for me was it. I was like thinking to myself, no more exploitation. This is it. And
I have to say that if we're speaking about the same ambassador, I have to say she was very supportive of the Southern African community in general. And she was somebody that really tried to encourage the integration and kind of like interaction of people of color in general. In Finland, and she was awesome, man.
She was a diplomat and a Pan-Africanist.
Exactly,
and she was smart and strategic, and I really appreciate it. And she was the only ambassador that didn't want, from the ambassadors that we had from South Africa, she was the only one who didn't want you to say Your Excellency. You could call her by name, by her first name, and that was completely fine. And she was casual, but still. Business was business.
So now you're in the business space, you're importing wines, you're creating events. What happens when your family now finds out that, hey, Michael is doing good?
My mother's biggest frustration with me was at the age of 30 of deciding to go back to school and studying. And getting a degree. She was like, when are you finishing? You've been studying forever. And when I did eventually finish studying, the articles being on radio stations talking about wine, the word reaches home. And when word reaches home, the idea is that, okay, you're making it. And we are not as your family. And because you're making it, you have to subsidize or even sponsor our entire lifestyles. Like I'm talking about the most basic of things, from transportation to groceries, to entertainment. Whatever they needed, I had to sponsor.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, some years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, maybe 20 to 30 years ago, we coined a term for this phenomenon. We called it black tax. And that's basically when you sponsor people as the breadwinner in the family, and they basically expect you to, as I said, pay for their expenses.
That is the thing, because we talked about it in the last episode, where when you see your story from behind, like from the back or from like the sidelines, you just see the good things, right? You see when you are moving up, getting better jobs, you move to Finland, then you you're building your own thing. From the outside, you only see this guy's moving up, like he's very lucky. People don't see the work behind. People don't see that you sacrifice stuff. People don't see that you are having a rough time. You're going through rough times to better yourself.
You're eating instant ramen and,
And the worst part about it is that while people are struggling outside of the countries and sending out... So this is the thing, right? Of course, there's Ubuntu that you must make sure. I am because, you are. And we need to take care of each other.
Yeah.
But I've also seen even online, there's even been memes about this thing where people are like, doing their best outside of the countries that they come from and they're struggling. And then they go home to the people that they've been supporting and they find out, while I'm riding around on a scooter, they're hustling. You're driving a Mercedes-Benz and a BMW and all of this,
Yeah.
So But I,
So what had happened is basically when I was experiencing this black tax, so to speak, I decided that let me open up to my friends and find out, are they experiencing the same things? And when I did that, I realized, oh my word, all the friends that I have that are from developing countries, it's something synonymous with developing countries for some reason. And I realized that that they were all going through the same thing. And I decided that why don't we document this? And the reason why I wanted to document it is because I wanted to going back to your point, to draw a line, to paint a picture between how the money is produced that gets sent over to X country. For example, a guy on Wolt on a bicycle for hours and hours trying to deliver food and earning some few euros per delivery, and then at the end of the month having to send a chunk of that to his family, and his family not understanding that he's not just in Europe having la vida loca, but he's actually sitting on his ass, literally, and trying to hustle. And then I tried to basically paint a picture of how the money arrives in the said country and how the money is spent.
Yes.
In the said country.
What I've noticed, for example, in my experience with what I've seen, first of all, when you brought this topic up, it's something I notice. I know it happens. I've seen it a lot, but I've never talked about this with anyone. We talk a lot about many issues, but I don't think we've ever talked about this. So when you brought it up, it's like, it's great. I have never even thought about bringing this up because I think Finnish people might not even understand. They see a foreigner, they're like, oh, they're coming here. You hear from time to time this like, oh, you're stealing jobs or whatever, right? But people don't realize that a lot of these people who are like, they're like grinding, for example, in Bolt, and they're many times they're not just getting money for themselves. Is they also have to send, and maybe they're struggling a lot just so that the family can have a better life.
We have workers in our restaurants that are from Vietnam and from different countries, India, Bengal, Africa, and they're students, they're working, but they're also sending money home. You know what I mean? Like, so,
And there's something I'd like to bring up in the few minutes that we have that's very important. There's a campaign that's been run by certain Finnish companies here in Finland that they go to Africa, they advertise Finnish education, and they say while you study in Finland you'll be earning good money. Like they talk about ridiculous numbers like 5,000-6,000 euros a month, and these students get excited, or these potential students get excited. And they come to Finland and they realize there are no jobs, or at least they don't come by that easy.
I read about that.
And the students have been committing suicide. Because the families back home are saying, we sold our land, we sold our house, we sold
just
everything that we have just to get you here so that you can start making euros and subsidize us in return. And now we are having to support you over and above what we spent on sending you there. And the students have been literally committing suicide, one after the other.
Yeah.
That's
been a very sad case, actually, because it's been... I don't think a lot of information about that has come out the way that it should, and it's a very big problem. And I think that, as a country that is trying to attract people here, there needs to be a realistic management of expectations. Absolutely, because things definitely can't be that way.
Yeah.
This is also a crazy thing where because this is a situation I haven't heard of, for example, and I can see it happening because I understand the whole background of it. But also, when I moved here, I'm lucky enough that the part of the family that might do these kind of things, there was some situations where we are not in touch anymore. But also, I've heard comments from that side of the family where they're like, "Yeah, but you're in Europe, you're making tons of money." And these comments came when I was in a really rough spot where I haven't even gotten a job. I'm scraping to go by. I was working like crazy hours. And they're like, "Yeah, but you're in Europe. You're making euros. You're living the life." I was like, "Mate, I'm barely making it through."
My mother didn't even.
It's important to remember that there are certain countries even that have started calculating immigrant remittances as part of their GDP. This is a real thing.
No, in America, it's a big thing. When every restaurant worked out in America, there was always like dishwasher that started from the bottom up, from Mexico, and they're sending money home all the time.
And that's one of the things we want to capture. We want to capture the entire life cycle of the movement of money from countries where it's produced to the country where it's spent. And we're trying to get to that figure as well to see how much money is really moving across these.
The thing is, I think it's hard to trace it because most of the time it's like Western Union. You know what I mean? They're sending cash, so like How does a country calculate how much of the GDP is from people from other countries bringing it in?
I mean, the simplest way is to extract the data, right, from all these wiring companies like Wise, like Remitly, and so forth,
Revolt and all that,
and so forth. Is just to extract the information and then come up with a figure that is somewhat agreeable. And fair to assess the amount of money that we are sending. But basically, at the moment, Warner Brothers came on board. Myself and a colleague went to Warner Brothers and we said, "Look, here's a presentation of what we go through. It's something fascinating. Nobody, as you said, has spoken about this. People are very hush-hush about it, even though everybody's doing it. Let's make something out of this, and let's make a documentary film out of this." And they were happy with it. They were really impressed.
That's amazing.
And they said, "Let's go ahead and do this." And that was about 2.5 years ago. And we've been shortlisted now to get this documentary on Ule, for example, as one of the platforms. Netflix is not really doing that well, according to them. So we're not looking at Netflix right now. But we're trying to get it onto the screens, right? So that people can view this and conversation can start happening.
I think this is a great thing because I think this is one of those things that will make people maybe understand immigrants a bit better, or like in a better. It will bring a different light to immigration, right? Because it gives a bit more context that people might not have.
And it affects the Finns as well. Because many people who have spouses as Finns, the Finns are directly affected by it, even though, nobody speaks about this, as you said.
It is unwritten.
We're starting, we were here a few weeks ago. This is the second part. We had to take a small break, but we're back at it. We had some pizzas last time. We forgot to talk about the place. Slicemonger, as you can see, is a new addition of
You'll see it on the B-roll.
Bunkers,
coming up. Yep.
Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, basically, it's a funny story because I've known Slicemonger for about a couple years now. They did a couple pop-ups in like Longatory. And, of course, I knew the owner, and I've been trying to get some kind of working with him because, in my heart, I mean, I love New York-style pizza. I mean, Neapolitan, I feel like market's oversaturated with it. It's like Neapolitan everywhere. And the thing about Neapolitan is that you have to do it right, It has to be fresh. Where New York slices, it holds better, it travels better. If if you get a takeaway, it'll still get crispy. Whereas Neapolitan, you have to eat it right there and then, to get the full thing. So I was pretty happy when they came on board and opened up here, since we had a slot here, and it's been good. It's been bringing more people in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, as you guys can see, we expanded out the bunker, the Noob arcade. So we have like pool tables and there's more arcade games, shuffleboard.
Nice.
Dance Revolution.
The smart dartboard, which is quite nice.
Smart dartboard is pretty cool. Yeah, that's been pretty big hit also. So
I'm just happy you guys have a pool table. I like to play pool.
I know.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, so if
I
like to play pool,
it's one of my favorite things to do as well.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
We should definitely play sometime.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So as you guys can see, we're drinking sodas, except for TK. We had a beer here.
Yeah, what happened, guys? Why are you drinking?
Our last podcast was at a brewery. Coming soon.
Heavily edited one.
Yeah. If a brewer ever asks you to go out drinking, just say no. just say no.
Yeah, we were meeting with one old friend. Very nice to see old friends. The next day, not so nice.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But yeah.
Last time we finished off, you were talking about some projects that you had.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, specifically the project that I was referring to was the one with Warner Brothers, where we are exploring the phenomenon of remittance, which is nicknamed in South Africa and other parts of the world as black tax. Mm-hmm. And as I was saying, that it had nothing to do with blackness or being black, but it's kind of similar to sort of blackmail or sort of the black market or something like that. It's just a negative connotation to remittance. We doing this because we just basically figured out with a friend of mine in Helsinki when we were having a chat that, hey, we've all got the same issues going on with remittance, with sending money back home, especially when we see that money being misused, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't seem to have any record of the amounts that are actually flowing through from those who are sponsors of their families and friends back home, because people are using different platforms from Remitly to Wise and Western Union. You mentioned them, but we don't really know how much money is flowing through these channels, going back home in places like Africa, Asia, sort of Russia, you name it. So we thought that this is worth doing a documentary about, and that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, and this documentary is going to be like based on facts and figures, or is it just kind of like, are you trying to gather as much data as possible? Like,
yeah, we're trying to.
How would you, like, because people probably don't record it when they're sending it out.
Yeah,
maybe they do.
What we're trying to do is capture people's lives. So we're trying to feature certain people who are affected by black tax, and then we're trying to capture their lives and draw a line of similarity between them, to show that regardless of the different circumstances that they come from, they all share at least one similarity in this phenomenon. So that's the approach. It's just to highlight certain people's lifestyles and their lives in relation to remittance.
I think this is something very nice to highlight, because I think a lot of people living in Finland who have lived in Finland, and the culture is a bit different, right? So I was mentioning this to my girlfriend. I was telling, we're gonna record a podcast, like talk about this topic, and she was like, well, I've heard about it, and she actually like read a bit more about it. She was like, I had no clue this was such a big thing.
Yeah.
For her, it was surprising because in Finland it's not a thing. But she was telling, like, well, I think a lot of people don't realize the pressure on a lot of foreigners that have this situation, and they are trying to make it better, like make a better life, but you also have a bit of the pressure back home, right? You might have the normal stress that everyone has in their life, but then you're adding another layer on top of it, right? And it's a big burden, or it could be quite a big and heavy burden on people.
Yeah. The funny thing is that there came a moment in my life where I decided to actually stop, and that is an option. after more than 15 years of giving, I decided to stop. And the reason I did that is because I picked up something. Something was really peculiar. I picked up that my 20-something-year-old brother and my 20-something-year-old sister became despondent. They just didn't want to look for work anymore because they knew that the groceries were guaranteed every month. Yeah. And that's the minimum viable need that they have to be able to survive is just to get food. And that's what I was providing for them. Electricity they had, water they had, so they didn't need to worry about their basic needs. Yeah. And their desire to aspire for more in their lives just diminished. And I was the primary reason for that. Or should I say my generosity was the reason. And it worked. They literally started panicking when I stopped giving. And they realized that the groceries are not coming, or at least not in the amount at which they had received them before. And they realized that they were running out of food before the month would end, and they just panicked. And they started looking for work frantically. And both of them indeed did find work. And they started working.
Shocking.
Yeah. I have a question here, because I usually, when you get people used to giving, you're doing it out of generosity. I want to help you. I want to do a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But when you bump into this situation, because I've seen it with many people, I've seen it in my family, when I suddenly say like, well, me helping you is kind of hurting you more than helping, and you take that back, a lot of people will not understand that you're doing it for a good cause, right? You're doing it out of like, mate, I don't want to do harm to you kind of thing. And you will be perceived as like, oh, you're an asshole, right? Because now people feel entitled at some point to what you're giving. Has this affected your relationship, or did they at some point realize like, well, okay, he had a point?
Yeah, I mean, I think with everybody, it's going to affect your relationship with your family. They're going to see you as a traitor, basically.
Yeah, and I think there's a red line there, actually, because if we look at kind of like the history of not so developed countries, I would say, is that there was a tendency that families would have a lot of children so that you would have help with, taking care of the house and labor and stuff like that. And as countries become more developed, they have less children because there's no really that need, because you have like social security networks, social welfare and stuff like that. So in and I think that part of this black tax is kind of like, the social welfare net that has that we're expected to kind of give back in that way. But as things change, it becomes really problematic because it can be very disabling, as you mentioned, that
But it's a good point that you mentioned, because I think that it's an overlapping of cultures at the moment, because this phenomenon of black tax sprouted in the middle of that system that you talk about in, for example, in Africa, where people look after each other until old age, living in the same compound. No
Same
old age
generation.
homes, nothing like that. And you find in Europe it's completely different. It's completely the opposite on the one hand. So there's an overlap of these cultures, and it's creating some kind of friction because we are in the middle of it. We have to decide which direction are you participating in? Like, which direction are you going to go in? Are you going to be giving, or are you going to be distancing yourself? And I'm sad to say that it even goes to the extent, I don't know about you, TK, but being from South Africa, it even goes to the extent where family members would want to harm you. If they tell you that if you come around in the next family meeting, being the person that you are, who doesn't give, who doesn't support, who doesn't provide, don't expect to have a warm welcome, basically.
In general,
you get threats. You get threats, and it's really funny. And the thing is, nobody was talking about this when this came up with this friend of mine in Helsinki. That when we were discussing it, like, nobody's documenting this and talking about it because it's affecting so many people. And as I got to know more people from around the world after having moved here, I realized that, man, Russians are doing the same. South Americans are doing the same. The Asians are doing the same. And when I count these people, we're talking about billions of people who are participating in this shadow economy. That nobody's talking about. And that's where the interest peaked in basically documenting this and doing a documentary film about it.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because I looked at some stats, and just in Nigeria alone in 2023, $19.5 billion were remitted from the diaspora. That was about 35% of sub-Saharan Africa's total inflows of money. And that's just Nigeria. So if you're looking at the rest of the continent, we're talking about huge amounts of money. The thing that is maybe kind of like still... Well, the thing that I would like to understand more, and I hope maybe you touch this in your documentary, is that how are these monies being used? Right? Are we starting businesses? Are we going to party with them? Are we actually doing things that are productive? Or, maybe all you guys can chip in on.
That is a problem. You see this phenomenon in Mexico is quite big, right? And they actually document I don't know the number, but it's a huge number. And for example, the government uses that number as the economy is not doing the best, right? And this last government, they were telling, this money amount increased, I don't know how much. It's like a crazy revenue for the country. And you are like, they see it as a positive thing. But for me, it's negative, right? Because people feel the need to send more money because of, the valuation and stuff. So I wouldn't consider this a positive thing, that you need that, right? But in Mexico, a lot of people go to the U.S. We all know the story. They cross the border, try to make money, send money home. And, there's people who just go, make some money, come back. But there's a lot of stories, and I don't know what the percentage is, right? It might be a minimum percentage, but you hear a lot of stories of someone that goes there, and they have it can be like a spouse, it can be parents, and they're sending money. It's like, I have a tiny piece of land, they start building, and they're like sending money every month. And, they live with the bare minimum. They live in a small room or shared with hundreds of people kind of thing, and they're sending all the money. And they go there 5-10 years. It's like, hey, I'm sending you money, build my house, do this, do that. They come back home after a few years. It's like, hey, where's the house? Oh, well, actually, we needed the money to survive, mate. And then there's they went, spent 5-10 years, sent all the money, lived in the really bad conditions, come back and...
But they have a brand new car.
Someone's driving a Beamer.
And they come back with nothing, man.
But I also have to admit that I know of some success stories.
Oh, of course.
Where friends of mine have, two of them actually, have sent money on a regular basis back home to people that they trust. And it's not always a family member, by the way. Sometimes you have to outsource an individual whom you make a deal with. And this one friend, for example, said, look, I need you to build these apartment buildings for me. Or not for me, but I need to manage the process of building these apartment buildings. I'll send money and I'll identify the contractors and you just manage the process. Be the man on the ground, basically. And lo and behold, at least in the end, the apartment buildings were actually finished and they were built. And what the deal was is that this gentleman who was managing the process of building them could live in one of the apartments for free. And he rent free. And that worked out very well for them because he just had to manage just getting, or he did get some form of payment as well. Just to subsidize the deal that they had of him having a place to stay. And they were completed, the apartment buildings. And now my friend is renting them out, and those apartment buildings are now generating an income for him.
That's good.
And I have another friend as well who did the same thing. He was fortunate because he did it with his father, and his father didn't screw him over, and the buildings were complete, and he's also generating income from them. And that income is... Now, the cool thing about this is that he's not paying any more. He's not paying remittance anymore back home because he said, "I gave you apartments, put people in them, and basically all of the income that you generate from these apartments, you live off." And it's not all of us who have those success stories. Some of us send money back home, and we see the WhatsApp statuses being updated. And you see people living it up and partying and having a good time, and you're wondering, how did you afford it? Wait, I just sent you money, so it's my money that you're using to live it up. So the success stories are not as we don't have as many success stories as we would like to have.
Yeah.
That's the painful thing.
For me, it is. I don't know if it's the same in Africa and Asia kind of thing, but for example, in Mexico, because I think here it's more common that people plan ahead, right? And then, but in Mexico, I guess it's related to the 50% or more of the country lives in extreme poverty, right? So your financial decisions are not based on, well, I'm comfortable, I'll put some money aside, invest in something that later will give me money.
This is all I have.
It's more of an immediate thing, right? So I think it makes it, those kind of planning ahead and stuff is a bit less common. And it brings a whole different set of problems. And I think that's why maybe some stories don't end up to be as successful, right?
I think also, I don't think what people realize is that, when we're talking about remittance, for people that are not familiar with this, is that it's not that you come to a different country, you've made it, you got a desk job, and you start paying. No, I'm talking about people, people that start coming here as like dishwashers when I was in America, making less than minimum wage, and they're still sending money back. Same thing here. I have students from Vietnam that come here that work in my restaurants, and they're sending money back to Vietnam. So, all different income levels, we're sending money back. It's not that, you made it. No, you made it to Europe, you made it to America. Okay, when can you send money back?
Exactly.
And this is the thing, because back home, a lot of people, just by being here in Europe or in the US,
that thing's a higher status.
They just think like, no, you're printing, right? And like for a lot of us, it takes many years if you ever make it, right? It takes many years of hard work and stress, and during those years, especially if you're barely making ends meet, and then you still have to take a chunk of that. I think that puts way more pressure on people.
And that's one of the things we want to document, actually, because if our family members back home get a glimpse of the struggles we go through to be able to afford, and one of the things that is important to also document is the standard of living and the expenses that we go through. And sometimes I try to put it in perspective to my sister to say, hey, I just bought a donut and it cost me €3, which is 60 rand. And when she says, when I put it that way, she says, one donut, 60 rand, how could it be? And I say, I just took a bus. It cost me 270, which is about 57 or 54 rand. And she'd be like, how can it be that one trip that lasts only 2 kilometers can cost you 54 rand? So I always try to break it down in a language that she can understand. And then I see that she sympathizes a little bit more when I tell her about the cost of living, and she understands a little bit more as well.
And I think that's always very important to make clear, because I think that there are different ways of showing how you're living in Europe. And this sometimes is a problem, which is why diaspora going home sometimes, people look at you sideways like, oh, you're living in Europe, and then you come there and you're balling for 2 weeks while you're there, and people want to make it seem like they're doing huge things. So whoever's watching will be like, oh, okay, so if you're doing so good, my friend, I need a car, I need a house. Why don't you bring me these Jordans? Why don't you bring me this? And stuff like that. So I think, telling the correct stories about living in the diaspora is just as important as well. And then the other perspective of it, of course, is that, and I think we touched briefly on this, is that a lot of families make, especially in the case of students, make a huge investment for somebody to go to university. They might sell off land, they might sell off cattle, they might sell off the things that was actually generating some income at home. So the return on that investment is that individual. So whether or not there is even pressure to send money at home, you as an individual being aware of what sacrifice was made for you to get to school, people will start sending money anyway without being asked. But then there's the other flip side. In your case, for example, you left at 18 years old, you were doing your own work, you probably found your own way to diaspora, and then still you feel, people are putting pressure on you to like, no, you must send money home, you must send money home. And it's a complicated space, this black tax thing.
But let's not get it twisted. It's not only the diaspora that's giving money. If you happen to be a breadwinner in general, even if you live among your people, you still have to give as the breadwinner to your extended family and friends. So this thing, you were looking at the stats of Nigeria, for example. That only talks about the diaspora. What about the money that's spinning inside of Nigeria? That's another huge amount as well.
Exactly.
So because this comes back to what you were mentioning, right? About they having big families and stuff. Because, for example, I've spoken before of I don't plan to have kids, or like it's like I don't think we're gonna have, and when I talk about this in Europe, people ask me like, "Oh, but do you think you're going to be lonely when you're older?" I was like, "Well, I cannot tell, right?
Yeah.
You could have kids and be lonely anyway."
Yeah.
But that's the first thing people tell. Don't you think you're going to be lonely?
Yeah.
If I say the same thing back in Mexico, the first thing people ask, who's going to take care of you when you're older? And that shows that different side of the coin. Like the mentality is completely different, right?
Exactly.
So people expect that when I'm old, your kids are going to support you.
Yeah.
And there's that pressure. Even if you live in Mexico, as you said, you don't have to get out of the country. That's you have that pressure anyway.
Exactly.
And touching on TK's point, actually, did we discuss this in the part one that there was student? Now it's plural. There's students who have committed suicide here in Finland because of this phenomenon. Selling everything off at home. Back home and financing the trip to Finland, and then the family expecting you to send money back because now you've made it to Finland, we've sold everything on your behalf, and then you struggle to find work, and you're the one now asking for your family to continue assisting you while you're in Finland for at least groceries and living expenses. And some students have been committing suicide.
Yeah, you feel like a burden, and it's very sad actually because, that wasn't easy. And I would also maybe say that I hope that the transition from having to send remittances comes. This is kind of like what I'm hoping for the future, that as wealth transfers actually start to happen in our home countries or home continents, that the need for remittances is going to become less. Because if you look at it here, for example, a lot of people inherit property from their parents and stuff. So you'll have a little bit of finance. You don't need to worry about paying for university, So a lot of these kinds of pressures are not there. And if you do decide to go study elsewhere, you can take a student loan and stuff like these are not, mechanisms that are available at home. But also these remittances are facilitating that for those that are successful, as you mentioned, you've created wealth that is not indebted at home, right? Wherever you are. And then you get kids. Those kids might not necessarily need to worry about all of the things about sending money because now they have apartments that they can use to pay for their university and stuff like that. And I have to say, like, my own experience is that I have sent remittances at home. But I was also very fortunate that my grandfather left things for us that have been generating income to the point that, okay, now I don't need to send remittances at home. And I think that generational wealth transfer, when it starts to happen, it could lessen but not completely necessarily take away the need, depending also on, what the circumstances at home would be.
Yeah, I'll tell you my experience as Vietnamese American. I think is a little bit different, but I think for millions of refugees that came to America, it's kind of the same story. So, like, actually, this month is the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. So, and I also left Vietnam during the fall of Saigon. So, my dad was in the South Vietnamese Air Force, and at the same time, the fall of Saigon, all the airport, everything surrounding it was blocked off, and you couldn't leave the base. So, me, my mom, my dad hopped on a plane just to close on our back. We landed in Camp Pendleton, California. Got sponsored by a refugee help group. In 10 years, my dad, my parents learned English, got jobs, bought a house. 10 years. I've been here 11 years. I couldn't even speak Finnish. Right? They bought a house in 10 years. Worked
to
their
be
ass
fair,
off.
English is fairly easier than Finnish.
Yeah. But 10 years, and then what they started doing was start sponsoring family members to move to America. And when I was younger, I just thought, I got cousins coming. It wasn't until I got older and my parents let me in on it. It's like, it's a guilt thing, because they think that, you're the lucky one. We got stuck in this communist regime where they had to go to retraining camps and concentration camps, and my parents are living up in America. So of course they're sending money back, trying to get as many people over as possible. So in our household, I remember we had a rotation of family members coming in and out, And at half time, I remember my uncle was just sitting on a couch like this. And Dad's like, hey, go to this community help thing, get a job. I'm not here to support you. I got my own family support. And then lots of family arguments because they come here to say, 4-bedroom house, blah 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 blah. Yeah, why do I need to work? I can just stay here. And I was like, no, motherfucker, get a job. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So a parent, so they, long story short, during that time, of course, we're still sending money back to Vietnam. And then about 7 or 8 years after that, we went back to Vietnam. And I remember, like, my mom giving me some money. Hey, give to your auntie. I gave my auntie. She goes in the bedroom, grabs a shoebox, throws it in there, like 20, 30,000 like American dollars sitting there. And I asked my mom, like, why are we still doing this? Like, well, Dad's the breadwinner of the family, you know. So again, we're talking about like just the guilty thing. Even though they're all older now, they still feel the need to send it back home because they don't want to lose face with the other families. And of course, you know, once you probably the same in our countries, you want to be better than a neighbor. So you know what I mean. So
it's competitive.
I remodeled my house because, you know, my family in America is sending me money. What is your family doing for you?
Yeah,
you know?
That pressure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
that kind of pressure.
That is true.
I also have because you made me think of this, where what's your experience? Well, I don't think we've ever talked about this, right? But when I came to Finland, my mom, her whole side of the family has a very European mentality because of how they grew up. And she was very excited. And she was like, hey, mate, you have talked about wanting to live somewhere else since you were a kid. I'm really happy for you. It sucks that you live. But hey, I'm happy to see you happy and happy to see you do something that you wanted. And relationship was always great. My dad's side of the family is a complete different story, right? I remember receiving a call, for example, from my grandma. We had some other issues, so contact was not great, but I remember receiving a call, crying. It's like, why did you abandon us? It's kind of like, you know, in their mind, I abandoned them. And it's not that, well, I'm trying to make a life for myself. I'm trying to get a better life. It's like, no, you abandoned us.
Wow.
So it's like, I think that brings all like different kind of burden as well in you.
Exactly.
Because even if you don't like it, that's still kind of like,
that's
man,
kind of,
it's rough, right?
It's true. It's true.
So I don't know how your families took that you were like, okay, I'm off.
I think my family was very happy that, you know, I was able to, you know, I moved from Zim when I was 16, you know, but in my family history, all the way starting from my grandfather, you know, there was always a lot of people in the house, just like, you know, in your situation as well. And his mindset that he kind of like implanted on whoever was the breadwinner or whoever was, you know, there was that if you come from a background where you have a huge family and maybe not everybody is doing as well, try to find the one person from each family that you can bring up and then help that person so that he can help his family. So if you bring up enough people, instead of you being the only one succeeding and having to take care of the whole bottom of the pyramid, you have, you know, multiple of you guys, and then the pyramid that you need to take care of becomes smaller. And I think that's a, you know...
That's good.
Yeah,
in the case of my parents, what we do is like, you know, 84, we opened our first restaurant in 88. And then when we started getting family over here, my mom was teaching those people skills to have restaurants. So now we have a restaurant in Connecticut that's owned by my aunt still. That's been there since like 1990s. So in a way, you know, we did do that.
Exactly.
And like you said, that's a success story. But the ones that are not are the one that the uncle on the couch.
Exactly. The chiller.
But I think that's the thing, right? When something doesn't cost you the effort, it's harder to appreciate. You have worked for something, then you appreciate it more, or you understand.
Yeah, but I also find that this thing of remittance and black tax in general is something to be managed. One of the ways to manage it is actually uplifting certain family members to a certain level, bringing them over to where you live or sponsoring them to go to another country, and that becomes an investment because, as you said, then you give less if you give at all. The same thing as you said, Tam, that happened with my family, my extended family, at least my cousins, that they started sponsoring each other. The first one went to Australia, and they went as a couple, and then they started sponsoring the following sort of family members, and then that family member who was sponsored once they got enough money in the country, they sponsored the following family member.
Exactly.
And now I have like a whole lot of cousins living in Australia right now.
Exactly.
Because of that. So that's one way. And the other way, of course, is to start building something meaningful back home that can generate income for the people that are there so that you can take a breather from giving. So there are ways of managing this. But not everybody has that acumen to be like, hey, you know what? Instead of giving for the rest of my life, so much money every single month for as long as I live, let me rather pull back sort of assess the situation, build something, or sponsor someone who can lessen the burden.
Exactly.
But one thing I'm curious, I'm pretty sure you'll figure it out in your research is that as the generations go on, do you think that mentality has changed a little bit? Because now, when we left Vietnam was still, communist, but now most of our countries where we come from now are a little more developed now. So you think the next generation of people coming here, they have a different mentality?
There's one sad fact about life is that there'll always be the haves and the have-nots. As long as that exists, I don't think that it will change. That's just my humble opinion. Before even doing any research or going into it and documenting it, I don't think that much will change.
I agree.
There'll still be there'll always be a need from those who have less. And that's why I use the word manage, that we just need to manage this in a very clever way, so that we don't end up giving a huge percentage of what we earn. There was a month, I remember once in 2014, I remember the year very clearly, 2015, sorry. I was just going through my transactions, and I figured out that I'd given remittance at home for 5 times in 1 month. And the reason for that is because we were talking about the emotional strings that family members pull. In 1 week, it's the health is failing me. And the other week, it's I need transportation because I have an interview. The other week, it's the groceries. And every week, I fell for it. And that was the only time when I looked at my transactions and I was like, wait a minute, something is up here. Like, I'm being bamboozled.
I've made a conscious decision to say that I don't want my children to be ever need to feel that they need to give unless they want to, right? So that's one thing that I know some people that I've spoken to as well that are kind of like thinking the same way. And as I was transitioning from just giving, I actually had a discussion with my sister, and she gave me some really good advice. She said, "Don't give anymore. Sit with somebody." And then ask them what is it that they want to do with their life. So if they give you a business idea, you tell them, okay, fine, I'll invest in your business and I'll advise you in whatever small thing that you want to do, right? So we sit down, we do a small little business plan, whether that is just, okay, I'm going to go buy some cabbages from there. So I just need the startup and I'm going to sell it. And then when I sell it, I'm going to have a little bit of money and da-da-da. What that allowed me to do was to say, okay, fine, I'm going to give you $100 for you to go and make your first order for your cabbages, right? That $100 you don't ever have to give. You don't ever have to give me back. And this little business plan that we have, if you follow through with it, I'm pretty sure that within the next 6 months or so, you're going to have enough money to keep buying your orders and have some money to live on, just as much as I would have sent to you. But if it fails, I'm out. And we did that with my sister, and it really kind of created an environment of where those people that were actually driven kind of started getting on their own feet and started doing it, whether it was starting a little garden at home or da-da-da. But then there was also those that were like, took the $100, maybe bought a bottle of whiskey, and they were like, and then it's like, okay, well.
It's a lottery, isn't it? It's a lottery.
You never know who pulls through.
It is also because I think the individual mentality plays a big role in these outcomes, right? But I also think the person who's sending the money or who's like in the outside or the breadwinner, because I saw it, for example, with my cousin, where I'm the kind of person that when I get these kind of calls of you abandoned us, I'm like, look, mate, of course it makes you feel bad, right? But I'm like, you cannot keep doing this because that's not how it works. That's not what happened. I'm sorry you feel about it that way, but if that's gonna be the situation every time we talk, then I don't want to talk like anymore. But that takes a lot of like strength to struggle with these kind of feelings, of guilt and stuff. And I saw it, for example, with my cousin, where he didn't have that strength, and he just was depressed all the time and stuff, and he had a lot of issues because he just didn't have I don't know how to call it. He didn't have the kind of like enough to push and be like, you know what, you're not gonna manipulate me like that. And you could see it took a huge burden on his mental health. So I think it also like you have to kind of manage the expectations. But of course it's easily said. But it can be very difficult.
I think what TK said about his son was kind of what I was getting back with the Gen Z is that you manage by education and like awareness.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
Hey, you don't have to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I went through it. You don't have to do it.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
hopefully, with podcasts and like your upcoming
documentary,
your upcoming project, it would be more. It's about awareness. Hey, don't feel bad, man. Like we all went through it. Of course, every family is different. They really might need help.
Yeah.
But don't feel that you need to send 3/4 of your paycheck.
Yeah.
It also helps listening others, right? Because I think this is a situation where you might feel quite lonely.
Yeah.
But then when you listen to other stories, you're like, well, okay, well, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah,
Like,
if I started a black tax support group right now,
it'll be every single immigrant. Yeah, every single immigrant in Finland will be like, "Yo, what's up, man? My name is."
But that's the crazy part for me. That we all know this happens. Right?
Yeah.
I have never heard anyone talk about it.
Exactly.
Like now that you mentioned it, I was like, oh, what's this? Because you just said like about black tax. And, what's that? You read about it. I was like, yeah, we have that too.
There's an element of shame. And that's one of the reasons, because nobody wants to admit that I come from a poor family. There's an element of shame, and that's one of the reasons why it's just swept under the rug in as far as exposure is concerned. And that's why with us doing things like these or things like this, it's gonna really bring about awareness, as you said, and I think when people start talking about it a little bit more, they're gonna learn about ways to manage it as well a little bit better. They're gonna learn about how to manage it a bit better.
And I think that black tax works as a different level motivator for immigrants to want to get into the job market. People in general, when they come over here, they're thinking about bread and butter issues, that I need to survive and I need to be able to send some money at home. So even if I am a rocket scientist, just give me a job, right? People want to work. People want to make some. Of course, you're going to get the odd one or two guys who are like,
Yeah.
But people really do want to work. And I think that, that's the other side of the message that you can actually bring about with this message, is that this whole idea that immigrants just come here because they want to enjoy, life and not work, it's absolutely BS, because people have, they really have, what do you call those?
Will drive,
but also responsibilities that push them in a place where they will do.
Yeah.
They will do the work that needs to be done. So,
I think many times it's not I would like to work, right?
Yeah.
Because I have to.
Yeah.
I just
it's
have
a need.
To.
Yeah.
Do or die.
Do or die.
It's a complete different driver for yourself. If you talk, because I've heard a lot that kind of thing, right? But if you talk to your bulk delivery guys, with your cleaners, with your, a lot of these people are educated,
master's degrees. I know more drivers have master's degrees.
PhD guys.
PhD guys.
I just cannot get anything else. Maybe I'll take this while I find something else. And well, it's a crazy situation, right?
That's a whole nother conversation about hiring foreigners. I've seen all the statistics, man.
It's crazy.
If you change your name, that's it, man.
Yeah. You should call yourself Janne. Don't be out here calling yourself Janne or
I got a CV from Kimi Räikkönen.
It's one of, and this is why now a lot of organizations are trying to, to kind of do the whole anonymous recruitment thing.
Yeah, I heard about that.
But I mean, at some point, I remember when I used to live in Sweden, right? My name sounds Japanese, right? So, and I spoke very, pretty good Swedish, and my accent maybe wasn't so obvious. So when I used to send in applications, and they would see the name Takura Matsuetu, they're like, "Oh yeah." There's a Japanese dude coming for the interview, you know what I'm saying? And then I would show up to the job interview, and I'd be sitting in the hallway waiting. And then,
Takura,
the interviewer would come out of the door and be like, Takura? Like looking around. I'm like, I'm over here. They're like, Arigato. They're like, no, we thought you were Japanese. I'm like, no, that's Sakura. That's the change. My name is Takura. They're like, oh, anyway, welcome into the interview. So, the name does make a difference.
But that's the thing, right? Because when I came to Finland, I've told this story probably. I was sending a lot of CVs. And then when I translated everything, I got some interview. And that's what I was saying. It's like I just need one interview because I know if I get interviewed, I have the experience, I have the knowledge. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And then once you get at 1 or 2 interviews, I was like, man, and I got in.
Yeah.
And I think once you have had a job here, it's easier to move because people say, well, you have experience, you have worked here. But that first, like breaking
that first
in,
job is hard.
That's very hard.
And this is inspiring because these are the kind of stories our family members need to hear.
Yeah,
they need to hear what the hustle is about. It's hard. How difficult it is.
Yeah,
they need to hear these things.
Yeah,
and I know of one dude, for example, who's he's a refugee here in Finland. He's a political refugee, and he can never go back home because as soon as he lands back home, it's guaranteed that they will kill him. So he's basically stuck here, according to him. And he gets support from the government as a refugee. He gets 300 euros a month to live off.
Yeah.
Accommodation is sorted, he gets that. And there are these food banks, so he can go there. This 300 is just for toiletries and whatever, and transportation and whatever other necessities he might have. But he still needs to give to his family back home in Sierra Leone.
Yes.
From this 300 euros.
Oh,
they
yeah.
are still expecting him to give at least 50 euros from it. And he has a bus card to buy, which is costing him 65 euros. Then this remittance, and then he has to survive off the rest.
Imagine trying to survive in Finland off of like what,
150
180 bucks. Yeah. It's crazy, man.
Anyway, so tell us more about this program. What is the timeline? Do you have a name for it yet or anything?
Well, the one big challenge that we have at the moment is the name Black Tax. It seems to be a contested title.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure that out. We might tweak the name a little bit. But as far as the timeline is concerned, we've been at this project now for 2.5 years.
Okay.
With Warner Brothers, and we're trying to get it to Ule, and that's happening actually this week. There were some meetings this week, and we're going to be getting some feedback from Warner Brothers about how the meetings went, so that we know when we can start shooting. It's a bit difficult to tell the timeline right now, but in the next 6 months to 1 year, we should at least have some, at least a finished product. Okay. In the next 6 months to 1 year, I think. Yeah.
I think that's great. I think once it's out, we can watch it and maybe have a conversation about it, because it is something that I find quite interesting.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, we're just talking that it will come like soon, and
6 months to 1 year.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 months to a year, then we should have a finished product by then. Yeah.
So is this like fully funded by Warner Brothers?
At the moment they are the only partners that we're working with.
That's cool.
They're the only partners that we're working with. We did consider platforms like Netflix and so on, but Netflix is apparently struggling. So for this type of content, they're not really that interested. People are on those platforms are more about entertainment than infotainment. So
have you thought about partnering up with like other organizations just to get more awareness?
Like what, for example?
Like some like if it's like an immigration group, or like some like even like Tampere like
associations and
stuff. Like
it's a good idea. I mean, I would definitely look into that. Yeah.
Just get when you see the documentary, you see like all these different companies or groups that are sponsored by it, or just like want to be part of. Like again, it's just all about awareness. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's been very educational and lots of information out there. So hopefully a lot more coming. What are some of the ways that people can find out more about this?
Well, the colleague that I work with, Kingsley Iffy, he's got a channel called The Wake Up Concept on YouTube. So he has a segment there on Black Tax that he just recently did. And we're going to be posting a lot more content on the subject on that platform. So that's at least one way to link up on the subject matter and get to know more about it.
Cool, great.
We'll be sure to link it in the description, and
let's hope this episode sparks a bit of interest in this topic. It gets people talking. I guess that's what we want anyway. That people talk more about these topics, and we'll wait for your documentary.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and remember to follow us on the Unfinished Unfinished.
Unfinished podcast is unfinished with no N.
Exactly.
Unfinishedpodcast.com.
Yeah.
Unfinished.pod. TikTok.
Instagram. Facebook.
YouTube.
Yeah, man.
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, man.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers.
Cheers.